Welcome to Coffee, Culture, and the Capital with Sophia and Greg.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Coffee, Culture, and the Capital, and to our first episode of 2026. Before we kick off, we have our coffee here. But Greg, your coffee mug is a special coffee mug. Tell us about that.
I know. I got this for Christmas from my daughter, and it's celebrating the fact that I have achieved grandpa status. So unbelievable, but I'm now a grandpa, and there's little pictures of our first meeting with little Shiloh. She is beautiful, and she likes to talk. And then here's picture with my wife. This is like right after the baby was born, and so that was in November. So it's very exciting being a grandpa and a new experience for me.
Yes, there you go. How exciting. Mine, like I said, is just a normal plain coffee mug. But, we just got back from being in Washington, D.C. There was a lot going on. There is going to be a lot going on in D.C. We're going to run through that all with you guys. But first, let's dive into something that kind of happened right before Christmas. So some people might have not seen it or heard about it because, when Christmas and the New Year's hits, you're not always up in the news with what's happening. So Greg, what is going on with a federal ruling we know as the Maribel A case?
Right. We've been waiting for this ruling for a while. As you know, California Family Council for the last several years has been defending parental rights, especially at our public schools, because California, based on its policies being pushed by the Department of Ed and the Attorney General, are saying to schools that children, no matter what age, have a right to privacy from their own parents when it comes to a child's gender identity. As you know, the legislature has been pushing new curriculum into our schools for the last decade, and now kids are being taught that they can be whatever gender they want to be, not just male and female, but an unlimited number of gender variants, all based not on their biology, but based on their particular feelings or desires, or, it's nebulous. So what's happening is more and more kids are saying, hey, I'm trapped in the wrong body. I think I might be a girl when I have biology that says I'm a boy, or the opposite. And so what the policy has been pushed down into schools is that teachers, when a kid comes and says, hey, I'm identifying as something else than the sex that, my parents told me I was, and they change their name and they change their pronoun, that has to be kept secret from parents. And there were two teachers down in Escondido, Christian ladies, who said, I cannot do this. I cannot refuse to tell parents what's happening with their own kid. I am not going to lie to them or deceive them. And that's what the school district policy was, that you had to keep it secret. They filed a lawsuit, and there's a federal judge, Judge Roger Benitez, who last year, he decided in their favor and said, you're right. You are being forced not only to violate your freedom of speech, you're being compelled to say something you don't believe. You're being compelled to violate parental rights, and you're being compelled to violate your own faith. And their faith says that biology is fixed. So, but that the case only applied to them. And so the judge had not, and it was only a temporary hold on the policy. But December 22nd, I believe it was, he came out with his final ruling, and they made it a class action lawsuit, meaning this decision that the judge made was going to affect every single school in California. So I was going to read you a paragraph that kind of explains what the judge is telling schools that they must tell each teacher and each member of the staff. And here's the paragraph, and it says, parents and guardians have a federal constitutional right to be informed if their public school student child expresses gender incongruence. Teachers and school staff have a federal constitutional right to accurately inform parent or a guardian of their student when the student expresses gender incongruence. And these federal constitutional rights are superior to any state or local laws, state or local regulations, or state or local policies to the contrary. That is a strong statement. And which means California has to change its policy. And the Attorney General, who is now on his website stating that kids have privacy rights no matter how young they are. And so this is a real rebuke to California. Now, that's the positive news. Now, of course, you have one federal judge makes a decision. The state can appeal his decision to the Ninth Circuit of Appeals, which is kind of the appeals court that oversees several states, including like Washington, I think Idaho, Oregon, and California are in that district. And so just last week, the Ninth Circuit put a hold on that decision temporarily until the case is argued out in court. But the attorneys for these teachers, they are asking the Supreme Court to overrule this stay that the Ninth Circuit put on this ruling. And so we are hoping that the Supreme Court comes through and enforces this new decision. So this is the fight that's happening, folks. If you don't have parental rights are next to, they're destroyed if California can state, in fact, that a 5-year-old has a privacy right from their own parents. I'm not sure what parental rights mean if a young little kid can make these kind of decisions about themselves without any parental oversight or input. And so we're excited about this, and we're hoping for good things. Hopefully what happens is the case completely goes to the Supreme Court, because the Supreme Court has been fabulous these last couple of years in defending parental rights as a fundamental right that states must honor. And so I'm confident, a lot of people are confident that, in the end, we're going to win this fight, but we got to keep fighting, keep standing up, and not just listen to our state officials who are eager to take away your rights to raise your children, raise them in the values you want, and raise them in the religious beliefs that you want. So there's my...
There you go. And yes, as things continue to move on with this case, we'll keep you guys all updated about what is happening. But it was a great little thing to hear about right before Christmas hit, about what was happening on and what they were saying in the courts about this.
Right. And just one more thing. If you're like, I didn't get all those details. Well, I put a story on our website, and I'll be putting out another story next week on this topic to keep you informed. So if you missed any of that, go to our website and get more details.
There you go. So head to californiafamily.org. And then if you're like, how do I know when there's new stories out and what's going on? Make sure to sign up for our newsletter at californiafamily.org. Then on Mondays, you will receive an email of the lowdown of what has happened that past week. And you'll get updated reminders about different stories such as this case. So definitely go to californiafamily.org and sign up for the newsletter to get those emails and keep up to date with what's happening in California. But on that note, as mentioned earlier, Greg, we were in DC this past week, and we were able to have some just great meetings with different people. We focused a lot on this whole topic of gender ideology and just focusing on that, how to best move forward in California, across the nation, and with what's happening there. Greg, do you have any thoughts or input on our past trip to DC?
Well, we've been reporting on this, but, the federal government, Health and Human Services, has been fabulous on this topic. The Trump administration has declared it is policy of the federal government that there are only 2 sexes, and those sexes are determined by biology, and that affects a lot of policy. Right. And they also have come out and said, no one is born in the wrong body, and that it is impossible for someone to be born one sex and then to receive drugs and surgeries to make you another sex. But that is what's been happening with our youth. Our hospitals have been, a kid doesn't feel comfortable in their own skin, and, is being told that, well, it's probably because you're trapped in the wrong body. You must be another sex. And here, we'll stop your puberty from happening, and we'll give you the opposite sex hormones that your body isn't built to deal with. but it'll make you look like the opposite sex. And so, and we'll give you surgeries. We'll lop off your breasts. We'll change your body to look like the opposite sex. All of this stuff has been so harmful to young, growing bodies. And so we have now the federal government is in the Department of Health and Human Services put out a comprehensive study explaining how dangerous this is, how all of these, this evidence supposedly supporting what they call gender affirming care is actually sex rejecting treatments. And it is long-term harmful for these kids. And so I'm hopeful that clear statement of reality is going to have an effect here in California. We already see hospitals that are pulling back. Kaiser, Stanford Medical Center, Children's Hospital in Los Angeles, Sutter Health have all said on paper that they're not doing this anymore. But I mean, one of the things we found out from the meetings we're having is that really they're going underground.
Mm-hmm.
All of this stuff is still happening. They're just not going to be as obvious with it. And so there was a analogy that I thought was really good in this battle. It's sort of like we've simply landed on the beaches of Normandy. We're on the offense, but the victory is still kind of far away because so much of our culture has been captured by this lie that kids can be trapped in the wrong body. And so hopefully we're returning back to reality, which is an encouragement for all of us to stand up, speak up. You know what's true. Don't be frightened into being silent about the most basic reality of the universe. The human beings are male and they're female. And it has nothing to do with how you feel. Right. And encourage your kids in that, even if they're struggling. So that's my little input on that.
Absolutely. And, it's common sense. You're born male or female and that can't be changed. But, that whole idea is actually another thing that is happening in DC that I will be going back to DC for is the Supreme Court is going to be hearing 2 different cases on the topic of girls' sports. And it relates back to this whole idea of this confusion of people being told that males can be females, females can be males, you can be whatever you want, that you aren't perfect the way you were born as a male or female. And so that is actually going to be on Tuesday, January 13th. The Supreme Court is going to be hearing the 2 cases. It's Hecox versus Little and West Virginia v. BPJ. And the cases are very similar on kind of how they started and what's going on. And so both the Hecox versus Little, that's out of Idaho, and then West Virginia versus BPJ is obviously in West Virginia. So both of those cases, what happened is those states introduced bills to protect girls' sports. Those bills were then signed into law, which is amazing. It's a pretty common sense bill to pass. Unfortunately, we just haven't seen that in California yet. We've seen the Democrats kill any bill similar to that. But these bills were passed and signed into law, and both bills, the ACLU decided to challenge and to ultimately stand in defense of males that want to be in female athletics, males that think they have the right to be in female athletics. So the ACLU challenged it at the court of law, and now we've seen it basically play out to hitting the Supreme Court. And so the Supreme Court will have their oral arguments on Tuesday, January 13th, but that doesn't mean we get their decision on Tuesday, January 13th. Normally, it's a couple months before we hear any decision. Some of you might remember that when at the Supreme Court, they did the oral arguments for the Dobbs case. This was on the issue of Roe v. Wade. That was in December. And then the following June, the results of their hearings came out. So it's going to be a great day at the courts, but don't expect to be looking for what their decision is. It's just their oral arguments. But ultimately, the Supreme Court will decide whether or not states have the ability to recognize that males have a biological difference than females and it affects sports. So they're recognizing whether or not states can recognize the fact that girls' sports need to be protected or not. We will see that play out on Tuesday, January 13th.
Well, it's also kind of exciting for you because really you have been on the forefront of defending girls' sports here in California. If anyone's been paying attention, Sophia has been everywhere, right? She's been on Fox News. She's been on doing press conferences in front of schools. She's been going to CIF and speaking up. She's been testifying before the legislature. Last year, we had a couple bills protecting girls' sports that died, but you testified on one of them on the dais, or not on the dais, but to the folks on the dais. And so I'm also excited that you are going to be one of the speakers, former athletes, that's going to speak with about 9 other Republican attorney generals at their press conference on this on Monday. So that's quite an honor, representing here California. So that's exciting.
Yes, yeah, I'm very excited for that. And honestly, very encouraged that there's 9 Republican attorney generals coming together to put together this press conference about saving women's sports, especially here in California. We talk about our attorney general, Rob Bonta, quite a bit on the podcast and quite a bit in our articles because he's constantly attacking parents' rights. He's done nothing to protect girls' sports. And it's very encouraging to see that there are attorney generals in states that are doing good work and that are standing for the truth and are standing for the protection of girls and women. And so I am very excited to be speaking at that. Riley Gaines will be there as well. Macy Petty, she's with Concerned Women for America. She'll be there. Jennifer Say with XXXY Athletics, she'll be there. And then we'll be with those attorney generals. So I am honored to speak on that and just excited to speak from a Californian's point of view and to really just make sure the California girls that are having to face males in their sports right now are continuing to have a voice and continuing to be brought into this story as we're talking about these things. And so we'll definitely be posting on our social media updates of where you can watch things live, what you can see going on at the rally. We'll be showing you guys all of it, but definitely be praying for all of those on the Supreme Court and just that they have the wisdom to make the correct legal decision here. Also, one of the co-counsels on this case is Alliance Defending Freedom. I'm sure many of you guys are familiar with that law firm. That's actually who represented us when we sued a library in Yolo County in Davis because they violated our First Amendment right. And so they are amazing. They will be inside the Supreme Court and they will be presenting their side of the case. So be praying for the ADF attorneys as well, and just for safety inside and outside of the Supreme Court. But we will continue to keep you guys all updated on that. And then the other thing going on in DC later this year that the CFC president, Jonathan Keller, will be attending is the National March for Life. And so for all of you Californians listening that are like, wow, I'd love to go to that, I just can't get to DC, can't make it out there for that, we bring the March for Life to you here in California. That will be Monday, March 16th at the California State Capitol in Sacramento. So you guys will be sharing videos from Jonathan in DC, and then you guys can all watch those, see how great that event is, and then kind of experience it yourself here in California. So that's Monday, March 16th. If you head to californiafamily.org, you will see the March for Life tab where you can check out all the information, and that way you can head up to Sacramento on March 16th. But Greg, even though there's some exciting things that are going to be happening in DC, a lot going on, unfortunately, there was some sad news that came out of DC while we were just there. And so if you want to catch everyone up to date on that.
Maybe some of you have already heard, but there was a member of the California delegation, a Congress member. His name was Doug LaMaffa, a Republican from the northern California area, way up north, Oregon border. And he was a great guy that we had met several times, and he passed away unexpectedly in an operation. And so that was disheartening to hear because he was a Christian. He stood up for our issues. We always joked about Doug LaMaffa making comments on our Instagram posts. He followed what we were up to. It was always so encouraging. And, I think it was last year, the year before, we actually went to his office, all 3 of us, Sophia and Jonathan and I, and we walked in, and I'm not sure if you've ever been to the Capitol, but, everybody's dressed to the hilt. especially legislators, right? So we walk in and there he is, dressed in jeans and I think some kind of sports jacket. This was a rice farmer. He was just a down to earth guy. He was not pretentious, easy to talk to, super tall. I think he was what, 6'5", but everybody had so many nice things to say about him. I mean, he was very strong in his views, but a kind man, and it's really sad to see him go. It's going to be a huge loss. I think before he was actually in the legislature, he was actually a representative in the state legislature, so lots of people knew him for years, and so it was hard to see someone that down to earth. Someone you would hope we'd have more and more legislators like that, right? That really cared about his district and represented them well. And so very sad to see him go. But yeah, so we actually stopped in his office just to, give our condolences to the staff. But, now they're kind of in a lurch. There's no one representing that district now. And, the clerk takes over the office and they have to have a special election, but this is an election year. So it's a little confusing about what's going to happen, because this is the same district. They carved his district up with Prop 50. Prop 50, his is one of the districts that they were seeking to take the district from him because they recarved it up and grabbed a bunch of liberal areas way down in Marin County and combined them with people all along the California coast, and then grabbed the top half of his district way up in the mountains in Redding area. So anyway, we really sorry that he passed, but are encouraged knowing he's with the Lord because of his strong faith in Jesus. And so hope to see him one day again.
Yes, and be praying for his wife Jill, and he has 3 daughters and a son, and so be praying for just their family in this times. But he was someone that you couldn't really say he was a politician, because that just sounds like a dirty word. It sounds like kind of maybe negative connotation. And he was a farmer that just would show up at Congress like that. He was a very down to earth, humble man, and he was rock solid on his beliefs. I mean, he stood so strong on the life issue. He stood so strong on the women's sports issue. He would brought up Chloe Cole, who is a detransitioner and who was wrapped up in all this gender ideology in California, brought her up to DC to share her story with people. He really had a heart for fighting against all the gender transitioning and harm of children done there. And one of again, Greg kind of mentioned it, he was always commenting on our stuff. He was resharing things to his story, but he always added a pretty funny comment. He never was afraid of calling out how crazy things were getting at the California state legislature. But one of my favorite comments it was a public comment on our social media post, was when we were watching Proposition 3 just a few years ago, which was the California legislature, everything going on with same-sex marriage. We were watching them try to do California's Prop 8. And Prop 8 is what recognized marriage to still be between a man and a woman. And the California legislature had to vote on this whole idea of Prop 3. What was going to turn into Prop 3 is marriage between a man and a woman, or is marriage basically whatever you want it to be? And not one Republican voted against this whole idea of marriage being whatever you want it to be, not just same-sex marriage, but it opened up the floodgates it could open up the floodgates for polygamy, for incestual marriage, all these different things. And when we posted that, not one Republican voted no. And I'm not saying all of them voted yes. A lot of them just abstained from voting, but not one voted no. He commented on the post and he just said, am I reading this right? That not one voted no, not one voted to protect Prop 8? So we responded, and again, it's publicly on social media. Yes, unfortunately, that's the case. Not one of the legislators here in California voted to defend marriage. And he made it very clear that he was very upset about that. And his name would have been the first big red dot on the board going against marriage. And so that's who he was. He wasn't ashamed to stand for his Christian beliefs and values. And I mean, you're seeing on social media from both sides of the aisle, people recognizing how great of a man he was to work with, to be around, even if they had different political views. He was just he just kind of came across like a funny dad. And so he will definitely be missed. And so just again, be praying for his wife, Jill, and their family. But with that, Greg, unless if you have any final things.
No, I don't. I think we're great. Just to also remind you, we are California Family Council is a nonprofit organization. And so we're dependent on our viewers and our supporters for financial donations. And so really do appreciate your prayer support, but we also really appreciate your financial support to keep these podcasts and enable us to be the tip of the spear for you. I know many people can't, stand before Congress or for the press or in all the ways that we are public on these issues, but it also takes support for us to be the tip of the spear on your behalf for Christians here in California. So encourage you to support us if you can. Thanks so much.
Yes, thank you all. And we will see you guys next time.